God sees me and God sees you. God sees us from a God's eye view. We've been talking about how God sees all of us from his point of view. A God's eye view is the high above shot, camera shot if you will, of down below. And it is that angle of us here on earth. We see this shot in many movies, many TV shows, many commercials. And in the movie The Truman Show, Jim Carrey, who is the star of the stage reality show. However, Truman, the character, does not know that he's the star of the show. And he begins to ask the question, who is running this show? Who is the producer and director of this show? And we have Ed Harris, who plays the godlike character, who directs Truman's life from a God's eye view on the moon. Now, Truman goes in search of answers, and as he gets closer and closer to the truth of what's going on in this filmed world, the director calls for storms, lightning, and waves to deter Truman from continuing on his journey to get greater answers. And then finally, after Truman has searched out and cried out for answers, the creator and director speaks directly to Truman from his God's eye view. Truman says, "Who are you?" And the director says, "Who am I? Who are you?" And this in many ways is like the story of Job that we've been exploring over the past couple weeks. And the story of Job is sometimes our story. And it seeks to answer the timeless questions of why do we struggle? Or why do we suffer? Why does God let bad things happen to good people? And why does God let evil exist? And so in the story of Job, we've gone through at the beginning where we see in the heavenly court that it's this holy horror show. And it's trying to depict what possibly goes on between God, the angels, and the spirits, and also Satan, the accuser. And so we have this scene in which we get an idea of how God may allow this to happen. That Satan goes to God and says, "What about your servant Job?" And God says that he's allowed to test Job. And so last week we talked about how Job suffered greatly. He lost his children, he lost his wealth, and he lost his physical health. And he began to cry out and ask many questions. And then this week we have God's answer. And part of it is this struggle that we have for the truth and to understand God's ways, because God's ways are not always our ways. Sometimes it seems as if we only learn when we're in pain or when the pain is great enough, when we suffer. It's funny, this morning I even saw this small little clip by Jim Carrey. And it's been funny since he's retired that he's become a spokesperson for God. And he was talking about how we have many choices when it comes to suffering. We can either come through it full of resentment and despair and be miserable, or we can learn from it and receive grace and grow in truth and light. But at times we don't know why God is allowing all of this to happen. And we have in this story that Job's friends tried to point out to him that same lesson. That maybe it's something you did, or maybe you're supposed to learn from all of this. And we too can be blind to our own sins and our own wrongs, and for some of the reasons in which we suffer. We're not always willing to see our own faults, our own parts, and what the Lord is trying to help us to deal with or to repent of. But we are encouraged to cry out, even to lament when we are struggling,